I'm Jane Hanson. This week in the arena, statute of limitations, charter schools, New York's new Archbishop, just some of the topics we have previously discussed in the show and some of what we're going to revisit today. Here for the discussion, as always, is Father Kieran Harrington, Vicar for Communications for the Diocese of Brooklyn. Elizabeth Scalia, contributing writer to First Things Magazine and author of the blog The Anchoress, and Grant Gallicho, Associate Editor at Commonweal Magazine. Let's do an update, first of all, talking about charter schools. There's been a change in the plan to actually institute these charter schools.
That's right. Two schools have been selected to be sites for the charter schools, St. John the Baptist in Bedford-Stuyvesant and St. Catherine of Siena in St. Albans. Basically, the big question was initially these were going to be conversions. We were going to pursue special legislation so that the students, the faculty would all be able to remain and be converted simply into a charter school. Upon reflection, we thought it would be a lot more efficacious, a lot quicker if instead of pursuing a legislative route initially, that we simply applied for charter status. And so that's what's happening. Questions still remain as to whether schools are going to be K through 8 or middle schools or just K through 3 or 4. So there are a lot of unanswered questions, but we're in the process right now, and we expect that the application will be filed before the end of May.
I'm assuming that the reason that choice was made was for speed purposes, so that next fall these schools could actually be open and the kids could have a place to go.
I think the question was we didn't want to get bogged down in a legislative fight, and we figured because we had all indications from both the Chancellor and the Board of Regents that these applications would be accepted. We figured that would be the best way to go.
So let's talk about exactly what's going to go on in these schools. They are not going to be run by the diocese?
No, as in any charter school, right? They're going to be run by a board of directors, and those board of directors are people in the local community. Now, they're going to be occupying the school buildings, where previously St. John the Baptist was, and where previously St. Catherine of Siena was. But it's going to be run by local community leaders who are involved in their parish and in their community.
And the assumption then that other schools would ultimately have the same thing happen if you're facing the crisis of funds?
I think the question for us is, and our perspective on this is that, look, we wanted to ensure that we were providing a values-laden education throughout our diocese in places where it particularly became difficult to finance that. That's the first concern. At the same time, we recognize this is less than optimal, right? We want to be running Catholic schools. We don't want to be running charter schools. We want to be running Catholic schools. In some areas, it became impossible for us to finance running an education. So the question became, let's run schools which provide the best quality education, a values-laden education, helping people become great citizens, but at the same time recognizing that they're not a Catholic school.
So let's say I've got a kid in a neighboring parish where one of these charter schools is going to be created. Why would I send my child to the local parish school when I could possibly send him to the charter school for free?
A charter school is not a Catholic school. And presumably, Grant, because you're such a good Catholic, when you send your kid to school, you're going to choose that school because you want your child to receive a Catholic education. You want them to understand what the faith teaches, and you want their entire education to be in the context of faith. So from your perspective, you're choosing the school not simply because it's the best education or that the environment is a safe environment, but what you're really choosing the school, the Catholic school, for is that you want your child to have a profound, a deep and rich knowledge of the faith.
Well, we've talked a lot, Elizabeth, about today's Christian child, today's Catholic child, and the kind of education that they're getting. And having a charter school, I understand the rationale because having a charter school or not having a school at all is really kind of the choice here. But when you get down to the basics of a Catholic education and how much we wrestle with what are our kids, the foundations of faith that might be lacking in today's Catholic families, doesn't this alarm you?
I don't see where it enhances much of anything. I'm at a loss really to understand, and I would like to understand a little bit better how this serves the Catholic community. I get the sense that you're saying, okay, Catholic priests and Catholic people might be on these charter school boards, but that's a big maybe. And it still isn't going to.
That's not a maybe. That's a given because the boards have been chosen, right? So that is the case already. The big issue is that when you're choosing where you want to send your child to school, the fact of the matter is these schools were closed. They were not going to be present. There was not going to be the option to choose a Catholic school. Many of the people in these communities are not choosing Catholic schools anyway because the cost of tuition is a barrier to entry. So right off the bat, the schools are closing because the tuition is prohibitive for many people, and we're only talking about $3,500 or so. So the schools are closing because there aren't the people who have the wherewithal to choose these schools. Now, when you consider what would be the alternative? The alternative is I'm going to choose my regular PSX or IS so-and-so. The fact of the matter is, Elizabeth, is in a charter school that's being run by these board of directors, they're going to get a values-laden education. They're going to be talking about things like truth. Why am I here? What's my purpose? What does it mean to be a good person?
You're going to be bringing the big philosophical questions
Absolutely.
into the classroom.
It's the Greek virtues. I mean, that's what we're going to be doing, the Greek virtues, which are grounded not simply in the Catholic tradition, but what we would say is in natural law. And that's something that they're not going to get in the PSX or IS 32. So from my perspective, is it subpar? There's no question. For a Catholic family, I think a Catholic education in a Catholic school is the best choice. Unfortunately, many of our people simply do not have the wherewithal, and we have to provide some sort of alternative for these parents.
Okay, but it seems to me then, sorry for coughing, it seems to me if you're going to go this way and necessity is dragging you this way, the necessity should also be dragging you toward improving the CCD program.
Absolutely.
Is that going to be happening?
It's one of the same. What's one of the reasons why, if you take a look at most of our schools, what happens? All the resources of a parish go to provide for the school. Subsidies in schools are, in many cases in our diocese, $300,000, $200,000, what the parish is subsidizing the school. What's the subsidy to the CCD program? $15,000, $20,000, $30,000? CCD programs are starved. The fact of the matter is most of the children, Catholic children in our diocese, are in public school systems. We have a responsibility to catechize these children, to instruct them in the life of the faith. And the reason why we're not doing it is because in many cases the resources are being siphoned off by keeping failing institutions going.
Okay, but how are greater resources going to improve the CCD program? If you're going to buy more books with stick figures saying God is special, we are special, Mass is special, they're still not going to get anything from it.
I think that
are new programs being developed within the diocese?
It's not simply a matter of the traditional 1 hour CCD program, but how do we make CCD, religious instruction, comprehensive so that it encompasses the child's entire week and not simply a 1 hour a day?
And that, of course, is coming. That's stuff you're going to continue to develop and to grow, and as we go along in this process.
In this process, the process of preserving the vision, which we have announced in the Diocese of Brooklyn, which first addressed the situation in Catholic schools. The next step in that, and going through that process, is tackling the catechesis in our religious education programs.
So it's evolving.
It's evolving.
Okay.
It is just as we are. And speaking of evolving, let's talk a couple of seconds about the new Archbishop, Dolan. What do you think so far?
Home run. I don't think there's any question that Archbishop Dolan has been a master in terms of reaching out to the people of New York and letting them know how much he cares for them, how much he loves them. He's taken on some big issues. He took on the gay marriage issue almost right away. I think he did so in a very thoughtful way, in a very compassionate way. I think he's being very well received by the people of our city.
And do you, Grant?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there is just something remarkably powerful about seeing a bishop so happy to have his job. I mean, and you saw the photos from the installation mass. I mean, the guy is happy, and that's pretty contagious, I think.
Is he?
He said happiness attracts.
Yeah, he's right. Attracts,
yeah. But is he a new generation of Archbishop? Because
oh, I hope so. I'm sorry, I do. I really hope so. You know, the other day there was a show with George Weigel, and the subject came up about how the Catholic voice is going to be, how do we get into the public square without being strident, without being the people of no. And I think Tim Dolan has a tremendous gift because he's able to say yes and no without talking out of both sides of his mouth. He's able to be pastoral and say, yes, I see your point, but this is why we teach this. And that's a tremendous gift to us.
And obviously he's also evolving. This kind of seems to be a theme of evolving here. We're going to evolve too. We'll continue this discussion in just a moment, so do stay with us. Lots more to talk about. Welcome back as we continue our discussion in the arena. We've been talking about Archbishop Dolan, and by the way, you do sound like you are a groupie.
I'm a fangirl.
Yeah, that sounds like it. But let's switch gears now to talk about the statute of limitations of sex abuse. We've spent an entire show discussing that subject in the past, and I guess the latest is that both bills, there are two bills that are both en route to legislative committees. And there seems to be growing attention to this whole issue. What's the latest from that?
I think that in New York State, right now there are 11 sponsors on the Carl Kruger bill, which is the companion piece to the Vito Lopez legislation.
Which is the one that the diocese
what we're
supports.
supporting, right? That the Diocese of Brooklyn, but the Catholic community in New York State is supporting because it's comprehensive, because it addresses all victims. It allows all victims the opportunity to seek redress. At the same time, it doesn't provide for a window, but what it does do is extend out the age limit for the statute of limitations. So we're supportive of the Lopez legislation. 10 Democratic sponsors in the Senate, 1 Republican, but there's, we believe that bill that the Lopez legislation has a certain momentum. Right now, the governor has indicated that he is unwilling to support the Markey legislation, and Speaker Silver has sent both the Markey legislation and the Lopez legislation to the Democratic Steering Committee. So it's likely that there will be a compromise bill coming out soon.
Grant, I know you've spent a lot of time. You're in the process of writing some articles about the statute of limitations legislation. What's your take on it? And the Markey bill is said to be really anti-Catholic because it's discriminatory against priests in particular. Do you agree with that?
I don't know if I would call it anti-Catholic. I think it certainly lends itself to the interpretation that they know that they can get money from the Catholic Church and other private institutions, whereas there's not a very good chance that they could overturn the law protecting public institutions from civil suits. So, I'm hesitant to say that the bill itself is anti-Catholic. I do think, though, that it's naive to claim that it doesn't target the church, because I think in some sense it does.
Grant, I have to just take exception. I mean, if people take a look at the floor debate on the Markey bill last year in the New York State Assembly, there is no question that it's anti-Catholic, that it's legislation that is specifically targeted to the Catholic Church and is really not interested in protecting children or addressing what is clearly a societal problem and seeking to bring about some healing for victims. It's targeted directly to the Catholic Church. Assemblywoman Markey knows it. The supporters of her bill last cycle know it, and that problem has not been addressed. But if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck.
Okay, well, we all love ducks, but I'm not sure that just because it targets the Catholic Church, that means that it's anti-Catholic. I mean, anti-Catholicism is a long-standing bias in this nation, and I also think that that from a victim's point of view, the church has a lot to answer for, and I think it's not as though the church is accidentally targeted by this bill.
Okay, so Grant, if the church has a lot to answer for to these victims, then what does the church do? We've talked about this subject. You've made impassioned statements about, look, once you've taken the innocence away from a young person, it will stay with them forever. It ruins their lives. It will affect them for the duration of their life. What does the Catholic Church do then to make amends for what's happened to these sexual abuse victims beyond the obvious of the money reparations?
Well, we've been doing it, but we've got to keep doing it. We have to.
I don't know that message is out there, though.
I think that Pope Benedict's message, Pope Benedict's work last year, opening that door, has been a resounding success, and I think other archbishops are like Archbishop Dolan, are sounding the same chords, and I think they're being well received.
But what about those Catholics who have left the church or are not practicing their religion right now because of this issue? They are not affected directly by the whole sex abuse scandal, but they have said, I'm not going to be a member of this church any longer. I'm not going to practice my faith because I'm so angry.
Jane, I just think that it's unrealistic for us to think that enough can be done. I think that we have to continually work. This damage is so deep for many people that we have to continually reach out and beg forgiveness and offer assistance. I don't think it's a work that's ever going to be done, and there's never going to be enough done because what has been taken was too great a value. That being said, so I think that that's important for us to realize. And that being said, I think the principal issue of our objection to the Markey legislation is 1 in 5 children are abused. Right? 20% of children are abused. The largest amount of abuse outside of the domestic situation, outside of the family, because most abuse takes place in the families, is in the public schools. Mm-hmm. And my question is why does Marge Markey, why does Senator Tom DeWayne not want to address the problem of abuse at epidemic proportions in the public schools? Right now, a child in the 4th grade can be abused. They have 90 days or 120 days to bring a claim. That is unconscionable. A person who is abused in a private institution, they have till the age of 25. Still not great, but that's 23. Still not great, but you know what? There's a great disparity between a person who's abused 12 years old and has till 25 and a person who's 12 years old and has 90 or 120 days. This is a question that if the legislature was serious, they would address.
Well,
Marge's being disingenuous.
There's no question it's an agenda-driven piece of legislation. So I'm very hopeful, and I think it is going to happen, that you're going to see not just a compromise, but something that leans much more toward the Lopez bill as opposed to the Markey. I think people realize that the Markey bill is discriminatory and unrealistic, and it may be economically expeditious, but it's so palpably unfair that nobody can really vote for that in a good conscience, unless they really do have, and I'm not trying to disagree with you, but I think Kieran's got a point here, unless they really do have such a beef with the church that they feel they need to make a public statement or take a public action.
Yeah, I don't mean to suggest that there aren't anti-Catholics out there who are behind this bill. I'm just saying that the legislation itself does not disclose that on its own.
If you read Marcy Hamilton's article in the New York Daily News
sure.
a week before
I've seen it.
Easter,
No, I know, I've seen it.
It's very clear that this is a woman who has an axe to grind against the Catholic Church. I mean, basically holding us up, vilifying us on this legislation.
I don't know if you would ever see legislation that specifically says, and yeah, by the way, we're anti-Catholic.
No, but except all you have to do is read the debate on the floor of the New York State Assembly last year, and guess what? You'll see basically, oh yeah, we're anti-Catholic. And all you have to do is read in the blogosphere. See, this is where I disagree with you. All you have to do is read in the blogosphere the remarks of people, the comments of people who are supporters of this legislation. And there is no question that it's anti-Catholic. The last acceptable prejudice in this country is anti-Catholicism. And some people who are persecuted themselves are the ones who are now the most strong in their anti-Catholic
sentiment. But we can't, it's not like you can say to a victim, maybe you shouldn't be so anti-Catholic. I mean, these people had their lives broken.
Necessarily the victims.
Those people had their lives broken because of the poor decisions of bishops.
It's not the victims who are the proponents of this. If you take a look Grant, if you take a look at some media outlets where there are very few Catholics who are reading them, it's very clear
that's not dispositive. I mean, the comments on the Times of the New York, on the website of the New York Times.
I wasn't even referring to the New York Times.
Well, whatever site you're referring to. Just because you show up on a website and leave a comment that sounds anti-Catholic doesn't mean that, the sponsors of the bill, you can just with blanket, you can't just say that they are anti-Catholic.
Can I just say something?
Yes, but make it quick.
I have lived through this. Mm-hmm. I haven't lived through abuse at the hands of a priest, but I have lived through this sort of abuse. And I think that there is a point where you have to stop being a victim. First, you have to have acknowledgement, and the church has begun to take that. It can never do it enough, that's true. But once there is acknowledgement, I have to say in my own life, you couldn't have given me $5 million and made anything better. Mm-hmm. What I needed was apology, what I needed was validation, and then what I needed within myself was the ability to forgive.
And reconciliation.
Yes, and absolutely. And if the church has something else to do there, it has to beg forgiveness, but it also has to encourage people who have been victimized to then look within themselves and to be able to find what it's going to take for them to forgive so that they can then get on with their lives.
On that note, we are going to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment with some final thoughts. Do stay with us. Welcome back to In the Arena. We are on what's called the net. which stands for
New Evangelization TV.
So what's the point?
I think the point of the New Evangelization is that in the past, the evangelization, the work of the missionary was really relegated to priests and religious. But the New Evangelization is a recognition that this is really the call of all the baptized. And I think that when you take a look at the panel that we have here, the anchoress, who's involved in the work of evangelization on the blogosphere, and Commonweal Magazine, which was started as a lay-driven magazine, are both examples really of fulfillment of what the New Evangelization is. And this is something which I think is really critical to the life of the church, that we can no longer just sit back and wait for people to come knock on our doors, to come to confession, or to come to the sacraments, that we really have to reach out and touch people in the places where they live, where they work, where they recreate, and invite them to join, to come to know Jesus Christ, to be able to feel comfortable to articulate their experience of Jesus Christ, and to enter into a deeper relationship with Him.
But that word, evangelization, almost sounds like it's
non-Catholic. It almost sounds non-Catholic.
It does.
I mean, that is the joke, that Catholics are perfectly happy to sit in the pews on Sunday, but they're not going to invite anyone to join them. And I think that has a lot to do with this kind of impression that, well, we're the Catholic Church. You come to us. And I think we're in a moment now when there's so much in the wider culture competing for the attention of baptized Catholics that
spiritual attention, you mean?
Not just spiritual attention, but places where a person can go to find meaning. That the church needs to develop new. I think this channel is a great way to reach out. But you see some of the internet ads, like the Sham Wow ad. I'm not sure if everyone has seen that.
That was Soul Wow.
Soul Wow. Sorry. ShamWow is the source for that parody, and which was great, because I don't think that people expect the Catholic Church to have a good sense of humor about itself, and I think that was a really powerful thing.
Elizabeth?
I don't know if I agree that the church has a sense of arrogant, we're the church, you come to us. I have a lot of evangelical and Protestant readers, and they'll tell me that it's very important to them that when they go to church there's a sense of fellowship. That somebody's greeting them and saying hi and inviting them for coffee afterwards. And they don't understand, and I try to point out to them often that, you're not being greeted in a Catholic church like that because you're being left alone. Because we understand that we're entering into a sacrament and a celebration that should be charging our depths a little bit. It shouldn't be about being social. It should be about the spiritual charge. Plugging into the outlet, the God outlet, for an hour and saying, okay, juice me up for the rest of the week.
But Elizabeth, what's odd about that is just that the Catholic Church is about salvation, communal salvation. It's not just me and Jesus. That's very much a Protestant notion, me and Jesus, sola scriptura, I interpret the Scripture. For the Catholic Church, that's not what it's about. We're saved as a nation, as a people. And it's ironic that in the evangelical church, there would be a great focus on the community and bringing the community together, where in the Catholic Church, where theologically we're grounded in the notion of community, it doesn't seem to
I disagree. I think we do both.
That's
I think
the term
that the
communion.
Catholic Church... No, the Catholic Church, it reaches out constantly to the community, to the wider community. Every Catholic parish I know reaches out into the community and helps people.
Well, you just said that people are left alone when they come to church.
I'm talking about worship. That's different. I'm talking about the Catholic Church is both. It is both an outreach and it is an interior food.
The whole nature of worship is that we're joined together and offering,
that's all well and good. Join together and everybody holds hands, and that's all well and good in community and la
Elizabeth,
la la.
if you're joining your prayers to the priest, that's what it is. You join your prayers to the priest.
Yes, you do. But you also have within the space of the Mass, and particularly within the space of the Eucharist, something that is so much more profound and so much more far-reaching and yet deeply internal than community prayers and people joining their prayers to the priest.
That's why it's called communion.
That's why it's both.
And yes, it is both. Let's all hold hands now and say it's time for us to go. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant.
Bye.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
And obviously, these discussions will go on and on. We thank you once again for joining us. A reminder, the net is always online, and you can watch this program and much more at www.netny.net. I'm Jane Hanson. See you next time in the arena.